Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians. Recent Tartarians.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent Tartarians. Recent.
What up, fam? Just before we start, the views expressed by the presenter are social commentary on the internet and do not necessarily reflect those of the presenter, nor YouTube or their parent company, The Alphabet, or any of the letter agencies such as MI6 or the CIA or NSA, or the Federal Reserve Bank, or the government of London, or Paris, or Washington, D.C., the reptilians, the Hyperboreans, the Vril, the SJWs, the progressives, the traditionalists, the prejudiced, and the open-minded, the poor, the free, or the elite, or the proletariat. And they should not be considered opinions, advice, nor should they be acted upon by anyone. Welcome to the show. So yesterday, apparently my show upset somebody, and we're not sure who yet. Kind of strange. I went and looked at my video from yesterday. If you guys recall, I made a video yesterday that was like Archimedes, you know, it was pigs in space and Archimedes, you know. And the thing was, I talked about a little bit of news at the beginning, and I talked a little bit about history. I talked a little bit about the Babylonian origins of Mormonism, so I figured I should probably put that in the title, I guess, because that was the intro of the video for like an hour. Guilty. But then, you know, there was a big thing about how Archimedes was really a high school student who went to Alexandria, which I think was an important lesson. It wasn't the greatest thing I've ever done, but, you know, some people liked it. And then I told my story about pigs in space. And I was talking to Mind Unveiled yesterday and this morning a little bit about his video, because he had made this video, and then I had made my talk because he had made this video, and we'd both watched Spirited Away. And he then said, yeah, I had my video taken down. And I don't really follow, you know, the internet as closely as you might think, because I'm kind of doing my thing a lot of the time. So I was like, wait, what? They took down his, what did he do? And then, you know, I'm like, what was it about? And they said, well, some Twilight Zone sync. I'm like, dude, I can deal with litigation of those things all the time, but it's clear that they're just trying to find little things that they can mess with you about, and it's really weird. So I went and I looked at it and said, there's no appeal available, but there's no strike, and it doesn't explain what I did, but it basically says I was selling snake oil or something like that. Like it was, you know, maybe the titles were confusing, and so maybe from now on I'll put Xirtus presents at the beginning, or Xirtus dash at the beginning of all my videos. That would be something I'm trying to figure out what to do, but they won't give me advice. So then I go and I finally get in touch with tech support, and they're confused because they seem like nice people. And, you know, of course, when you start a conversation with tech support, if you're Andreas, it's always like, hello, Jasnet, how are you today? I hope that your day is going well before, and you know what I mean? Like, there's a way you got to do it. And I'm talking to this person, like, I'm just trying to make sure I'm following all the policy rules right, and I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. And they're like, yeah, we have no idea what's going on. We have to talk to some people. You know what I mean? Because when they realize that there's like a manual hold, because it says on my email that the YouTube team reviewed my content, because of course they have to be paying somebody more than they're paying me to like review my content to make sure it's safe. And they have this kind of thing where they're like, well, you know, if it's popular, we want it to be seen. And they don't want to end up like Netflix, right? Or anything else that's run by the same group of people I used to work for. And they know it's like that's what's keeping, and it's the same thing that's going on right now Elon Musk is dealing with, where they're openly saying, like, they're not openly capitalistic. They have, you know, ideological goals. Anyway, person I talked to, probably a decent human being, God only knows, but they seem nice, and they said they're going to get back to me. They're really trying to figure out what's going on. Who knows? They're probably not going to lose their job over telling me what's really going on, but maybe something good will happen. Anyway, if you want to see yesterday's video, it's still up on Odyssey, of course. So let me just really quickly remind you guys, if you don't already spend enough time, pigs in space, ladies and gentlemen. Odyssey.com, where all the freedom is, the aggregator of champions. You're going to go to Xirtus, and Xirtus has videos up the yin yang. There's a few more videos that are censored on YouTube that are there. They're all better quality. I think it's just a nicer feel. You can actually get Odyssey on your TV, like a Roku station now. There's like a thing you have to download or something, but it's really, there's no hacking involved. It's just like, you just install it with like a peripheral package. So I would say check out Odyssey. I'll be doing a lot more content through Odyssey anyway. I just think there's just something about the main brothel. You know, there's something about whoring yourself through YouTube that just seems like the way to go sometimes. So hopefully that won't last forever, but that's where we're at. Let's move on to some of the topics for today. Let's see here. So Emmanuel Macron announced new French government following re-election. By the way, just to remind YouTube, I do news before I do the content. And today's video will be on the subject of the video, which is mind uploading, transhumanism, and also it'll go into a bit more into the Vedic AI and the idea of, because there's a lot of ideological neurology being studied in India right now in the University of Madras, that's trying to correlate the idea of avatars with mind uploading and stacks. So just so you know, just before you freak out at me, like I cover what I say I'm going to cover. Okay, pigs in space. So Emmanuel Macron, new French government following the re-election. So French President Emmanuel Macron announced the new French government on Friday afternoon. The new cabinet will meet for the first Council of Ministers session on Monday. The announcement comes days after Elizabeth Borne was appointed as the new prime minister, the second time a woman has held the position in 30 years, Reuters reports. So crazy stuff going on around the world. I'm almost afraid to even bring it up because it's supposed to be a history show, but I just figured you guys should know that Mariupol is now opening schools again because they are no longer under control of the Azov and they are back in stability. So sorry to the West, but anyway, good for them. And I got to be careful. I guess they didn't want me talking about what is monkeypox. Should we be talking about it? I could, but somehow that's going to get me in trouble too. I mean, I'll tell you what, just because there's something wrong with me and I can't stop myself. Substack, Access of the Ordinary, what's the real thing with the monkeypox cases? You want to get into it, this is where you got to go. Okay, so the link, I'm not going to share it, but you just got to go there, accessoftheordinary.substack.com, and you can get yourself the less is wrong thing on them. And that'll help you understand what's going on, and hopefully that doesn't give me trouble either. The iron of Earth's inner core could be in a strange super ionic of it state. Study finds deep below the crust of the Earth, past the thick mantle and liquid outer core, lies a 1,220 kilometer, 760 mile ball of solid inner core. But a new study has suggested that the inner core is not solid at all, instead forming a supraionic state. I think they're talking about plasma, by the way, with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon, making it unlike either a liquid or a solid. What is that thing? What is plasma again? We can't exactly drill down 6,371 kilometers, 3,959 miles to the center of the Earth to check what's going on. I think we've done about 10. So scientists use Earth's natural drill, seismic waves from earthquakes, to understand the composition of our planet. However, with these measurements, the inner core remains somewhat of a mystery. In 1930s, indirect evidence suggests it could be solid, and a few decades later, it was thought to be a crystalline iron. But this incredibly hot, incredibly dense ball in the middle of our planet is still making us guess what's going on in there. We know from seismic wave data that the inner core is soft with a low shear wave velocity, meaning it cannot be solid iron or iron alloy. Some scientists think that it could be a second inner core, while others think that due to the lighter density that it would be expected by pure iron alone, there could be some light elements as an alloy. But a new study led by Yu He from the Chinese Academy of Sciences has now investigated the potential phase of matter this mix of elements may exist in down, arriving at the suggestion that the solid state of the core might really be a supraionic state instead. We find that hydrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hexagonal closed packed iron transform to a supraionic state under the inner core conditions, showing high diffusion coefficients like a liquid. This suggests that the inner core could be a supraionic state rather than a normal solid state. Okay, just so you know, this is everything we've been saying about the center of the Earth. Okay, and then maybe your Zoloft stopped working because a liver fluke tried to turn your nth generation grandmother into a zombie. Funny title, but I think I can get away with this one. So the idea is, in your genetics, you have your familial genetics, and in your familial genetics, you have they've experienced carcinogenic mutations, but more than that, they also experience mutations of a teratogenic nature, and a teratogenic mutation affects the offspring far more than the current generation, right? And even if it has carcinogenic effects, it might also have teratogenic effects, and vice versa, right? So you might be experiencing one and consider it the other, but it's really, that's kind of the lesson there. So you might have things about you that don't match up with the rest of the human genetics because of mutations that's about as far as I can go before I get in trouble. We're going to talk about transhumanism in a safer way. The scientists fighting for parasite conservation. Did you know that like 60 to 80% of all species are probably parasites? Yeah. Basically everybody is a parasite. Everything, excuse me. 75% of the links in the food webs and their study shows that our parasites account for 75%. So Santa Barbara parasite ecologist, University of California, Santa Barbara, Armand Couris. Parasites play a major role in the natural world that was previously just overlooked. Now there's also symbiotics, and I wonder if they're talking at all about symbiotics when they say parasites, because I think of parasites as the negative reciprocity. Anthropologically speaking, there is positive, neutral, and negative reciprocity. So there is this going to be a decent one? No, this isn't good. Anthropology, bro. So you've got in a cultural anthropology, the idea that positive reciprocity is where both sides of the agreement benefit in a positive reciprocity. In a neutral reciprocity, one side benefits and the other side does not lose out, is not detrimented. And in negative reciprocity, one is detrimented and the other wins out. A negative reciprocity still means that one side gets something usually, but it doesn't mean that everybody's screwed. But it does mean that one side is screwed, usually, to the detriment of that side. Okie dokie. So is Gato really the future of AI? Gato is based. You guys, if you're interested in AI, and that's something that's going to come up here, DeepMind there's two big guys, OpenAI and DeepMind. People love DeepMind. And I know Lex loves DeepMind. Lex Friedman loves DeepMind. So they've talked a lot about OpenAI in terms of AGI openly. They've mentioned it because a lot of people don't want to talk about OpenAI. I'm sorry, a lot of people don't want to talk about AGI, advanced general intelligence. They only want to talk about strict narrow intelligences. So if you make a system that can find you the cheapest tickets, if you have combined tickets to fly across the country or the world, that's a narrow AI. But a more general AI is something that can take information and it can use it, and it's usually two different systems, right? So you might have a data set and you might have an oracle, and an oracle program might take the information through the Turing box and turn it into something that is understandable because it's based on, it can lead the AI. So the thing is, not everybody's doing that. A lot of people aren't doing AGI, but there's a lot of really important AGI research. Not all in consumer tech. I think that's an important thing to remember, is that most of this stuff is in black budgets, at least trying to be. And there's only a few guys that are really trying to be like transparent about it. And the only reason they're trying to be transparent is because consumer technology is a more rapid, viable solution for some people. Some people are just naive, I think, is the other thing. I was very naive and I wanted to do things publicly as well when I was young, and still do. So I guess I'm still naive. But most people, a lot more AI is going on in Boston, in DC. Not in. You'd be surprised. LA is not that big of a deal. There's a little bit, and Texas has actually had always a large artificial intelligence scene, but Silicon Valley is only now kind of emerging in this AI scene, and particularly in AGI. AGI is psychologically important in Silicon Valley, but it's not necessarily what drives the industry. So Gato is able to produce generalized skills that allow it to interpret, converse, watch videos, paint, play video games, and it does so with a certain amount of control of understanding, so at least that it could be Chinese room, but it knows enough how to take the information and win the answer that it's pretty close, but it might still just be broad AI in the sense that it's able to aggregate data and present back to us information that we find relevant and say, oh, you were correct. And so it knows how to be correct without really knowing what it's saying. That's kind of the question that we're dealing with Gato. So that's why we were saying, is it really the future of AI? And there's a lot more question there. So the person who matters the most in the field of artificial general intelligence a friend and a scholar, Ben Gertzel, and a hero as well. I think he's highly underrated. And some people who don't understand him would probably not get that he's like one of the most decent human beings on the planet, or Earth, you know? And yeah, he's been maybe accused of bringing forth AI, you know, before other people have, because they're just like, oh man. But when you start to get into what this is all about and what is happening to the human race, and when you look at the origins of these ideas from the Vedic philosophies, from Buddhism, from Taoism, from the Akashic record, really, this idea is not new. And the idea that magic is somehow without technology is really this weird modern misnomer from J.K. Rowling. Really, your phone, you know, is an enchanted rock, right? This is an enchanted rock. There's enchanted rocks in it. It's got enchanted glass, which is, you know, sand that's been, you know, alchemically changed. So technology is part of the craft, which is part of magic. And so anybody who said, oh, well, we need to get away from technology, get back to the ancient world where they practice like telekinesis and talk to animals, well, you know, how are you going to get there? And it's not necessarily that we're benefited all the time by technology either. And I think that's important to make sure that the people that are saying, hey, technology is making your life worse, they should be heard. But in between tradition and futurism is modernity. I think modernity is the enemy of both tradition and futurism. And I can see the value in the homestead by the river, made by hand, made of wood. But I can also see the value, and I can't forget it, of the water wheel. Okay, back to Gertzel, my buddy here. Can all human concepts be reduced to combinations of a few primitives? I think we all kind of know the answer to that. It's hard to do. But how primitive can it be? The notion of reducing all human concepts to combinations of a few semantic primitives or few simple classes of primitive concepts is one of those things that's extremely appealing at first and then gets thornier and thornier as one digs in further. But it's a conceptual direction I've been thinking of plunging back into in the context of the push to rebuild the Cog Prime cognitive architecture atop the new OpenCog Hyperion infrastructure. OpenCog is the open cognition, transparent AGI that's in the hands of the people. Anyone can take the code and they can do whatever they want with it. Has data structure sets and a bunch of tools for looking through and making patterns out of the data. It's an amazing thing, and it's crazy. It's free. I mean, not just gratis, but made for it's like the Constitution. It's free. Declaration of Independence. Cog Prime doesn't require reductions of concepts to a small primitive set, but if such a reduction could be carried out sensibly, it would have a lot of advantages in terms of streamlining Cog Prime design, engineering, and teaching. So I thought I'd share some of my related thoughts that have been swirling around in my head. Many of these have emerged in conversation with Czar Gertzel. I think we're going to have Czar on the show in a week, like Thursday, whom, for better or worse, I recently nudged to take a look at David Calmer's related book, Constructing a Reality, that I'll mention a bit below. Anna Wierzbicka, Natural Semantic Metalanguage, is where I first encountered the notion of semantic primitives. However, the couple dozen primitives she proposes are, to my mind, evidently not quite adequate in themselves as foundations for human intelligent world building. Examples: substantives, I, you, someone, people, something, thing, body. Relational substantives, kind, part. Determiners, this, the same, other, else, another. Quantifiers, one, two, some, all, much, many, little, few. Evaluators, good, bad. Descriptors, big, small. Mental predicates, think, know, want, don't want, feel, see, hear. See, also with quantifiers, I already see a problem. There should be fractional quantifiers. There should be half. Should be something there, quarter, anything, half at least. Speech, say, words, true, actions, events, movements, do happen, move. I think half and third would be fine. Existence, possession, be somewhere there is, be someone, something, is mine. Life and death, live, die. Again, there's something kind of also about the imminency thing. Time, when, time, now, before, after, a long time, a short time, for some time, moment. Again, these are ideas that AI would need to understand in order to have a certain amount of neurological, semantic, metalanguage cognizance, cogency. Space, where, place, here, above, below, far, near, side. insight, touch, contact. There's a reason why some of the best AGI engineers are parents, because you have to understand how neural development works in a child. Logical concepts, not, maybe, can, because, if. Another thing that should be in there is zero. And I don't know if logical concepts, zero can belong there, or if it has to be in a quantifier or something, but it should exist. Nothing, needs to be there somewhere. In existence, possession, nothing isn't even written. Similarity, like, as, way. Wierzbicka is biased on the side of minimalism in her primitive set. On the other hand, formal ontologies like psych and sumo introduced a massive number of primitive concepts in a way that gives the feeling that as the knowledge bases are extended, a number of primitives required will grow to infinity all too rapidly. So in 2013, in an unfinished rough draft manuscript called Composition of Mind and Reality, Ben Goertzel attempted to create a middle ground where 50 or so primitives were used within an abstract, functional, logical language to generate a wide set of concepts in the OpenCog native format. Just to give a rough flavor of this work, here is a random selection from the manuscript, an attempted rough formalization of the notion of a perceptual hierarchy in terms of various other simpler concepts. Perceptual hierarchy is a control hierarchy in which the control events are instances of pattern recognition. We may define equivalence, specialized control hierarchy, H to Z, H is less than Z, and hierarchy H is greater than implication and member AH. And then equivalence, perception hierarchy, H is greater than specialized control hierarchy, H is less than pattern recognition. I don't stand by this crucial initial stab at a formalization of my perceptual hierarchy concept and share it here only to give a rough flavor for what a reduction to primitive in a quasi-atomies framework might look like. David Calmer's massive in-depth analytical philosophy, the work The Construction of the World, constitutes a different sort of contribution in this direction. An in-depth analytical philosophy argument that a reduction of all human concepts to a modest set of primitives is possible, but doesn't try to actually carry out on such a reduction. I've lately been thinking about resurrecting the Composition of Mind and Reality project in the context of meta-language we are creating for OpenCog Hyperion, and using meta to create a semantic primitives-based seed ontology for the Minecraft world and the Sophia-verse metaverse that we will be using for experimenting with embodied learning in Hyperion. And so, towards that end, I've been musing a bit in a general way about the nature of semantic primitives, and some of the musings is summarized here. What does reduction to primitives mean? First, what does reduction to primitives mean? One can answer this mathematically, and I pretty much do so in the combinational computational model I outlined in section 3 of my paper on formalizing Occam's razor and simplicity measures, which is here, but it's a big old paper, so we'll just explain how he explained it. Basically, the formalism there sets up a branch of atomic entities that can act on each other to produce new entities. It posits a bunch of combinatory operations specifying what acts on means. Given cost for the entities and operations, one can measure when a reduction of one's entity to a recursive combination of another comprises a simplification, aka reduction. This kind of formalization is an extension of the magician system, formalization I introduced in Chaotic Logic in 1995, and encompasses a variety of other formalisms like algorithmic information theory and pattern theory. It is a way of looking at a general computation as a sort of algorithmic chemistry. It seems to me that if we take this sort of formalism as a basis, we find that concepts reduced to combinations of primitives is basically the same as Bateson's meta pattern. That is, that patterns which connect, patterns which being combined operations that combinations operations that from some perspective provide a simplified view of the result of the combination. The approach becomes more interesting, of course, if a small percentage of the mind's content is primitives and a large percentage is combinations, which brings us back to Wierzbicka. Her intuition is that a very small number of primitives is enough to combinatorially generate all common human concepts, but this remains a bit unclear. And as I'll note below, I am more driven to interpret semantic primitivity in a approximately correct setting. David Calmer's Constructing the World, Rudolf Carnap, and others in the early 20th century tried to formalize common sense ideas by coming up with precise definitions for every common sense concept. This is pretty much what Psych and Sumo are trying to do. Psych and Sumo are trying also. It's equivalent to reduction to semantic primitives in the sense that logic formulation consists of reductions of derived entities to logical combinations of logical atoms. But the core failure mode of this pursuit so far has been that clever wonks can find exceptions to any formalization proposed for any common sense concept. For instance, if you define knowledge as justified true belief, someone can find examples of belief that are true and justified but don't commonsensically seem to be known. Maybe the justification someone has for the belief an incorrect reason that only become clear much later, but the belief is still true all along. Trying to come up with some more and more refined, formal definitions of knowledge that will cover all weird counterexamples anyone can come up with becomes an endless and pointless intellectual exercise. Philosopher David Chalmers, in his impressive tome Constructing the World, interrogates what these wonks are doing when they come up with these exceptions. They are appealing to some a priori understanding, scrutability of the concepts. So then he tries to figure out what this sort of a priori scrutability means, basically considering it as an inferential scrutability contingent on an assumed knowledge base. One way to think about it is a common sense concept is not typically summarized by a particular finite formalization. Rather, it's summarized by a posit of increasingly complex and detailed formalizations. Posit because only formalizations can obviously generalize another. Then more and more detailed formalizations can be arrived at inferentially from the assumed knowledge base. Okay, I can kind of explain more of this, but I'm going to skip a little ahead to this part. Embodied communication prior, I described in Engineering General Intelligence in an early paper, can be interpreted as a hypothesis about the semantic primitives, which need to be human-like intelligence, i.e., for an intelligence that is centrally concerned with controlling a body in a spatiotemporal world and communicating via the world with other similarly embodied entities. ECP is basically a more precisely defined version of what Yoshua Bengio formulated roughly and years later as consciousness prior. ECP looks at the community of agents controlling bodies in a shared world, communicating via various modalities, such as linguistic communication, indicative communication, demonstrative communication, depictive communication, and intentional communication. So I'm just going to define these. Linguistic communication in a language where semantics is largely not necessarily whole, interpretable based on mapping linguistic utterances into finite combinations of entities drawn from a finite vocabulary. Indicative communication in which, e.g., one agent points to some part of the world or delimits some interval of time, and another agent is able to interpret the meaning. Demonstrative communication in which an agent carries out a set of actions in the world, and the other agent is able to imitate these actions or instruct another agent as to how to imitate these actions. Depictive communication in which an agent creates some sort of visual or auditory, etc. construction to show another agent with a goal of causing the other agent to experience phenomena similar to what they would experience upon experiencing some particular entity in the shared environment. Intentional communication, in which an agent explicitly communicates to another agent what its goal is in a certain situation. These sorts of communication are argued to correspond closely to the types of memory in the human mind, and also to the types. By the way, there is a recent study that shows that these are the types memories are stored at least in 5 places because you have different aspects of the memory. So you can't just erase a memory from erasing one part of your brain because it's not just your 5 senses, it's your 5 learning capabilities, really. You have one sense, which is touch, and you can't touch anything. So you have this virtual learning capability, which are, it's stored in your brain. So in terms of probabilistic modeling where human intelligence is concerned, we are generally working with a prior distribution in which processes associate with these. Oh, man. I'm still reading from this pig window again. That's hilarious. I'm just going to keep the pig window on. That's part of the joke now. Basically means we are working with system components with which it's fairly cheap and easy to build systems carry out these forms of communication. In semantic primitive terms, this suggests that human condition is probably best decomposed into a vocabulary of primitives where there are primitive concepts corresponding to each of these communication models. Wierzbicka's minimalist primitive set does seem to touch the ECP basis as one would expect. Okay, so the point of all that, when I'm talking about this, is this idea of learning and what a person is. And so many people constantly are telling me, AI can't happen. And Owen Benjamin said this to me. He's like, I don't think transhumanism is going to work. And I was like, that's a very interesting response. I've never heard that one. Because most of the time people say, it's evil, you get that, or it's wrong, I hear that. And most of the time that's true. But the idea of it being impossible, I don't believe that. I think that's kind of the biggest, otherwise it wouldn't be a fear. And it's also not just that it's not impossible to me, it's very likely. It's part of nature. I think that's the thing. It's natural. It's natural because nature evolves in a sense, not necessarily the way people think, not like with, but your children change based on your experiences. The choices of who makes children affects what kind of children exist in the future. I don't know how clear you can be on YouTube anymore, but yeah, it matters to an extent. And if we look at the technology that exists now with AI and neural link, the real question will be when merger happens. Like there's going to be a marriage, right, between technology and biology, and the human's going to be the wedding chamber, let's say. So whatever comes from that marriage, and whatever ends up existing after that inevitable divorce, I think is the question. Because there will be technology in humans. Humans will be assisting technology in its ability to learn because it will be using human processes. When we are networked, that will make it a lot more difficult for the difference to be stopped. And afterwards, then we'll see. We'll see if AI just assimilates into humans, and then humans become a transhumanist thing that uses technology to advance their selves, or if the human condition and the memories and the systems of learning and models that we use end up in this, this ghost in the shell. And I know someone's going to call it soulless, but I think they need to read Hegel's Geist. We'll do that at some time. So let me jump to my little article here. First is 7 hours ago, 2 military satellites communicated with each other via space lasers. Now, this is actually, I swear, what this whole video is going to be about to begin with. Well, really not. I mean, it's the beginning of the conversation about something called free space optical communication. So free space optical communication is an optical communication technology that uses light propagating in free space to wirelessly transmit data. It's an ancient technology. Here's a dude with the Graham Bell, and they're using light to send sound, right? And it arguably could have been used to send video. A photophone. Photophone is invented in 1880. It's before the telegraph, before the phone. Part of the Tartarian community likes to think this was invented before Graham Bell, and that he just discovered it. And then this is technology that was a little too complicated for him, so they kind of didn't know how to fully use it until later. Anyway, today, or 2008 at least, you have laser-guided data using this technology where they shoot laser beams, and the lasers are able to direct the information perfectly. And you also had this in your Palm Pilot. If you had a Palm Pilot, you're able to plug it aim it at maybe your Game Boy. You could aim the infrared light at itself, and that would work. Anyway, things are cooler than they've ever been. Let me see. Is the future optical? This is fine. A pair of military satellites launched last year have successfully completed an experiment to demonstrate cross-satellite communication using lasers in space. The company that developed the optical terminals said in a press release, even as private players rush to set up constellations of their own satellites in orbit, communication technologies has mainly remained the same for the last 6 decades. While communication speeds have improved considerably, a satellite still needs to send a message to the ground station on Earth to communicate with another satellite, even if it is orbiting just a few miles away. Reston, Virginia-based CACI International is working to change this and now has successfully demonstrated inter-satellite links. Khaki deploys the cross-beam free space optical terminals on satellites to enable inter-satellite optical communication. The company claims that its technology can allow satellite cross-link as well as bidirectional satellite to Earth links using systems that are less complex. Smaller in size and weight, need less power, and therefore are cheaper to operate. Working in association with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and Space Development Agency, SDA, Khaki launched 2 satellites named Able and Baker, equipped with these optical terminals in June last year, Gizmodo reported. The launch was also part of the Mandrake 2 program that is being conducted in association with the Air Force Research Laboratory's Space Vehicles Directorate, AFRLSV. The press release said, the Mandrake 2 program aims to evaluate the pointing acquisition and tracking algorithms that will be used in optical terminals of these satellites. On April 14th this year, the 2 satellites set to work their optical terminals over about 60 miles, 100 kilometers, and communicated for over 40 minutes. Infrared lasers were used to see over 200 gigabytes of data, first being encoded and then beamed to the receiver of the other satellite, which was received successfully. Defense applications for this technology are obvious. The point was mainly to explain how free optical communication works with lasers, and if that picture offends you, I have a more convenient one. Let me see if I've got it. Oh, I almost forgot to do the other thing, so I will. So here, by the way, is this picture of on the Earth sending data directly, and you're able to communicate faster without this undersea fiber line, just through satellites, which can be in low Earth orbit, and that's, in other words, right around here above your planes, just slightly. Here's your planes, here's your satellite, you're slightly above that. So it's not that high up. But I almost forgot to talk about the Tooth Fairy. So we're going to so guys, this is something I hadn't really thought about too much, and someone said, what's the deal with the Tooth Fairy? I think it was Scott, and so the Tooth Fairy is a weird thing, and I thought it was just this crazy Americanism, but it seems like it comes from Scandinavia. I know this is non sequitur, but deal with it. And by the way, because of yesterday's videos, send me super chats because I got to get through this. Pigs in Space. So Tandfe is... Oh, I have to translate this page. Sorry, guys. A tooth fairy, in the folk beliefs, different countries providing an attractive replacement using the form of a coin for lost baby teeth. Before the English tooth fairy became known among the children of Scandinavia, it was a gift that children received when they had its first tooth. The custom of giving such dental gifts seemed to date back to pre-Christian times. The Old Norse word is tanfe, where fe was the original word for cattle, meaning money or wealth. So in modern Icelandic, tooth money can thus be translated as tooth gift or tooth money. Famous dental gifts through the ages include the goddess Alfheim, who is mentioned in the Grimsval. Alfheim got Frey of the other gods in dental gift, Arla in the time. Another famous tooth gift is the gold ring. So you got to wonder, what's the deal with the tooth fairy, right? Like Tand Fey. Let's go Fey. Well, the deal with the tooth fairy, guys, I got the American version for this exact reason. Wiki. No, I got to do it right. Tooth fairy is the only way, man. Wiki. Okay. So according to the American Wikipedia, origins. In the Middle Ages, written in the Eddas, Old Norse tales, that children's teeth... Why would you give a gift to a child for his tooth? Well, in Old Norse culture, children's teeth and other articles belonging to children were said to bring good luck in battle, and Scandinavian warriors hung children's teeth on a string around their necks. Okay, so here's the deal. Magic children's teeth. I hope that's the next thing that people get excited about, because that's the thing. The dentist always... And I wanted my wisdom teeth back. I was like, what are you going to do with my teeth? And they took them. And the idea of selling my teeth even. They're like... I mean, granted, they were trying to give me like $5 for teeth sometimes, because I was like, no. And then I was just going to keep my teeth, because why would you want to... Because they're powerful. Come on. That's a crazy idea. I don't know. I like it. But I never got my wisdom teeth back. The dentist, he said, yeah. I was like, what are you going to do with them? Oh, yeah, like I'm going to do something with them? And now I wonder, and I've seen some pictures. Someone sent me on Instagram of crazy teeth art And they found an interview with somebody, some celebrity, and I don't know, but he was saying, yeah, I got a friend, he's a guy, he's a dentist, and he gives me teeth, and I keep a collection of teeth. And it was like on like Conan or, one of those other ones, so talk show. So that's weird, kind of interesting. Then I posted this on Instagram, and my cousin in Croatia was like, dude, weird. I kept my teeth as well. Thank you, Susan. You're the best. Thank you. Appreciate the super chat. But my cousin's like, I kept my teeth as a kid. They told us to keep our teeth. I'm like, really? Interesting. And then my friend in France, Joff, was like, dude, yeah, I still have my teeth. My cousin, my friend, my brother keeps his teeth. My parents, we have a box with them. So, I mean, like, I think it's an Americanism, but it's also a Scandinavian thing, because the Scandinavians used to be like, you don't need those teeth. You'll take them from other children when you grow up, because we're Vikings or something like that. Just a thought. So let's move back to the science before I get in trouble again. Pigs in space. So free communication, optical communication with lasers. Why am I bringing up optical communication? Well, because this will allow for data to be transmitted better than with radio, because it'll be directly beamed into things, which can then be instantly transported brief distances with radio. But laser is light speed, and so it's moving even faster. And spy satellites make connection with Laser Shark. Laser Shark. Brought to you by Laser Shark. I miss Laser Shark. That was the shark spy, shark actor was a thing. If you guys all remember, it was great. 2 U.S. spy satellites exchanged more than 200 gigabytes of data. Same article, basically. So when you start looking into this stuff and you find out about how communication is working in the future, it's also, there's this idea of the Dyson sphere. And, this might offend some of the people who believe we're living on a turtle exclusively, and I think most of the people that are more interested in the idea of flat holographic reality, which is what is allowed to be said on YouTube, will understand why we're calling it holographic reality. But Dyson sphere is a hypothetical megastructure that completely encompasses a star, right? And so the idea of a Dyson sphere is that it can shoot data through light, and you use these pulses, so you can make a giant laser, and then this laser can be used above a land mass, or it can be used to send radio or laser to manipulate data in saline solution. So you can use, so imagine you have a bunch of saline solution, a primordial soup, and everyone's like, how does it end up being architected, right? Well, in a technological idea, you would be able to send data, and we've been able to do this already, to seed life, literally, because you can arrange things in a particular order that amino acids start to form that can create proteins, and then there's a way to trip start life. I've shown this before, but I'll go back to our buddy Craig Venter. Jumpstart your life start. Okay, so this guy, important biotechnologist, not a bad guy. I know people think that playing God is kind of crazy, but I don't think. I mean, even though he's playing God, he's doing it in like a less devilish way than anybody I know, to be fair. And jumpstart life. Let me see if I can. Or cell. Transfect a cell with a synthetic chromosome, right? So, and this is something people get upset about. Like, they're like, what are you guys doing? But at the same time, this has to do life extension. And even if you're all Bible exclusively, like Christian Scientists, the Bible says you can live to 120. And it used to say 700 before that. So on one level, you can get to at least 120 this way. On another level, you might be able to break the rules, and go back to the way things were. So people are pretty interested in that. But the main thing, can you start a primordial soup and electrocute it and start a cell? Hell yeah, you can. And that was kind of the test. Like, could that be done? And yeah, it's been done. And you can make life that we know that we can arrange atoms too. And this is something that bothers people on the internet. They're like, oh my gosh, atoms. How could you literally believe in atoms? Well, dude, look at atomic force microscopy. Like, if you haven't ever used an AFM, I get it. But no, once you start using lasers and you start to see how things are arranged, and you get images of actual density, it changes your perspective of things. Using a SEM particularly will start to open up the idea to you a bit more that there are clumps of things that are clumps of things that are clumps of things. That bothers everybody for some reason. Horton, here's a who. And of course, this book is all about this idea that there's a world inside. Where's the book pictures? I want the book. What? Movie? I don't want to see that. Book. For crying out loud. Inside of this little piece of pollen, 1954, just in the atomic age. Inside this piece of pollen, he's got a world, and in that world, they are thinking thoughts. And there's an entire idea of sub-thoughts that are being thought by whatever's inside of that world. And this is this kaleidoscopic fractaling idea that intelligence is collectively growing. And to be fair, we don't know what intelligence is, really. We have all kinds of definitions, rather, of what intelligence is. And also cognitive skills and the development of a cogent mind. We're going to talk a little bit about that because it's going to matter. But let me just also jump into the most ridiculous theory first so that, the rest of it doesn't seem so weird. Let me see. Where is it at? The Boltzmann brain. And the Boltzmann brain. The thought experiment suggests that it might be more likely, possible is a better term, for a single brain to spontaneously and briefly form in a void, completely with a memory of having existed in our universe, right? So imagine you believe in science, and your science tells you that everything's made up of arranged things that are, really, this table is made of wood, your computer's made of aluminum, but I could replace the aluminum on your computer. I could replace most of the things, but even the memories on your computer, even the things on your table, I could put things on the table the same way. I could magnetically change the silicon board, which is really just a flat piece of silicon with iron oxide for rust for memory. I could change that magnetically so that it had the way you put your hand into the pins, and you see what's that thing with the pins in your hand, and it makes an outline of your hand. Outline, pin, hand. What is that thing called? Machine. Somebody knows what I'm talking about. Where you can you put your hand in, it leaves an outline of your handprint in pins. So the same thing can be said with magnetism. You could have all of the memory that's ones and zeros in just the perfect order of another hard drive. Magically, right? Could a hard drive somehow have the exact same ones and zeros line by line as another hard drive? And at least in that circumstance, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. But in terms of could atoms in space, could they all arrange themselves in the shape of a brain for just a second at least, long enough, and have the same, whatever it is in the human brain that makes the memories and electricity flowing through them in just the same way? Is it all material? And it really comes down to this idea of particular materiality. Theoretically, over a sufficient long time, random fluctuations could cause particles to spontaneously form literally any structure of any degree of complexity, including a functioning human brain. So this is also the question of, can you map out what a human brain is? Could you then 3D print, if you had all of the stardust, could you make the exact same brain? Would it have the same memories? In this thought experiment, a Boltzmann brain is formed as a fully formed brain, complete with memories of a full human life that arises from a state of thermodynamic equilibrium. The scenario involves only a single brain and not an entire person, because a single organ is less complex than an entire body and therefore more likely to spontaneously occur. Also, an entire body would include sense organs, which would immediately disprove the brain's misperception that it is a normal brain in a normal situation. Like any brain in such circumstances, the hostile vacuum of space with no blood supply or body, it would almost immediately stop functioning and begin to deteriorate. The idea is named after the Austrian physicist Ludwig Boltzmann, who in 1896 published a theory that tried to account for the fact that we find ourselves in a universe that is not as chaotic as the budding field of thermodynamics seemed to predict. He offered several explanations, one of them being that the universe, even after it progressed to its most likely spread out and featureless state, or at thermal equilibrium, would spontaneously fluctuate to a more ordered or low entropy state, such as the universe in which we find ourselves. Boltzmann's brains were first proposed as a reductio ad absurdum response to this explanation by Boltzmann for the low entropy state of our universe. the Boltzmann brain gained new relevance around 2002, when some cosmologists started to become concerned that in many theories about the universe, human brains in the current universe appear to be vastly less like the Boltzmann brains will be in the future. This leads to the conclusion that statistically, humans are likely to be Boltzmann brains. Such a reductio ad absurdum argument is sometimes used to argue against certain theories of the universe when applied to more recent theories about the multiverse. Boltzmann brain arguments are as part of the unsolved measure probability of cosmology. Physics, being an experimental science, uses Boltzmann brain thought experiment as a tool for evaluating competing scientific theories. So obviously there's a kind of a level of like, okay, I don't think that a brain's just going to materialize out of nothing, but that's not what this is about. This is about mathematically testing the absurdity of string theory, even before string theory, testing the absurdity of thermodynamics, and saying that everything is made up of all these pieces, and they're all ontologically the same. Carbon is carbon. Then why aren't we able to reproduce this amazing thing? And then theoretically it should be possible. Well, where is it? It should be happening all the time. So it's something to consider. But then there's the idea of cognitive development and the idea of narrative flow in ontology and teleology, teleosemantics. So, pigs in space. Piaget's theory of cognitive development is a comprehensive theory about the nature and development of human intelligence, originated by the Swiss developmental psychologist Jean Piaget. Piaget, I think that's Piaget. The theory deals with the nature of knowledge itself and how humans gradually come to acquire, construct, and use it. Piaget's theory is mainly known as a developmental stage theory. In 1919, while working at Alfred Binet Laboratory School in Paris, Piaget was intrigued by it has to be Piaget, but I've heard someone say Piaget, was intrigued by the fact that children of different ages made different kinds of mistakes while solving problems. His experience and observations at the Alfred Binet Laboratory were the beginnings of his theory of cognitive development. Piaget did not accept the belief that children are little adults who had less knowledge. Instead, he believed that children think and speak differently than adults. By thinking that children have great cognitive abilities, Piaget came up with 4 different cognitive development stages, which he put out into testing. Within those 4 stages, he managed to group them with different ages. Each stage, he realized how children managed to develop their cognitive skills. For example, he believed that children experience world through actions, representing things with words, thinking logically, and using reason. So he kind of started some of these ideas. I wouldn't say started, but he produced some of these ideas about simple reflexes, early childhood education, first habits, primary circular reaction function, secondary circular reaction phase, coordination of secondary circular reaction stages, tertiary circular reaction, novelty and curiosity, internalization of schema. And so they start to pick up on all the things that AI was just talking about, and we realize, so much of AI is based on what humans are doing, but humans are learning the same way that machines are. So what does that tell us about life itself? Well, we'll skip the Kardashev scale for now. We'll get back to the Kardashev scale, but it has to do with this idea of mind uploading. So let me see here what I can pull up for a second. Pigs in space. Not a bad picture, but transhumanism, mind uploading. Not bad. We'll stick with that for a second. And then I'm going to jump to identity. So, who are you really, or better yet, what are you, and which aspects of matter could a mind upload to a computer? Could the mind ever identically be the same as the original person's mind? Or could you preserve your identity over time? Could it keep existing after you were dead? What does it mean to preserve your identity of a human consciousness? What does it mean to be you? It's time for you to look inward and ask yourself the big questions about what you are. They've plagued everyone since the ship of Theseus. That's the ship of Theseus, is where you take a ship, you remove parts one by one and replace each part, and you keep the ship together. But because it's the ship of Theseus, that's the ship of Theseus. But you've taken every part and replaced it, so it's completely made of new pieces, but still the ship of Theseus. Now you've taken all the parts that were in the ship of Theseus one by one, removed and replaced, and you put them in a storage unit, because you don't need them anymore because you got brand new pieces, new deck wood, new everything else. And so all the old wood's there, everything. and all the old nails. So you take all the old pieces and you reassemble them, and you build the ship of Theseus again. So is that the ship of Theseus, or is the continual ship of Theseus, is that the ship of Theseus? It's kind of a complicated question about identity. So your identity lies in the psychological continuity of one thought causing another. Narrative theory of identity argues that our identity emerges from language. And lastly, that the Haxiadi theory of identity is really just your potentiality, this total sum of all the things you're capable of, in which case the ship of Theseus is all the ships of Theseus. We are all the dread pirate Roberts. So we have to look at the body theory or semantic theory or identity pioneered by Plutarch when we formulate these ideas. And that's when Plutarch talked about the ship of Theseus. And we also have to wonder, is like your continuous existence as a biological process, which really defines you. Identity. Darth Vader cuts off Luke's arm, but we don't say Luke is dead. And even if Darth Vader turns into a huge more man than machine, then we have to wonder, the big question is, at what point of bodily amputation does Darth Vader start to become more machine than man, a different person than he was before? If you lose a couple cells, it's no big deal, but if you lose more than half of your cells, are you still you? If you gain a new half of cells, are you still yourself? What does it take for you to stop being yourself? When you start to introduce nanobots and genetic engineering, if someone has a brain hemispherectomy, where they cut the brain in half because they've had a cancer, are they still the same person? If that half of the brain somehow was cut without merit, and then you take it and put it in someone else, is that person the same person? These are questions of identity which haven't mattered as much before, because usually if you get a head injury, you're a very different person to begin with. But now with technology, it might come to a point where these questions become, let's say someone with half a brain, you could install another positronic half of their brain. So then all of a sudden you do have this situation. Woody Allen said that he would rather go on living through his apartment than his work. I think Aubrey de Grey has said something similar about this too. Longevity research has been produced, and this question is really important to longevitists. Can we live in other bodies and still be ourselves? Can you become, if you are put in another body, how will that affect the way your mind thinks? If you're really comfortable with who you are, even if you're not, how much will that change you? And according to body theorists, the only way to truly live forever, and this is very Rastafarian, is to either reverse aging through nanotechnology or keep transplanting each individual organ one at a time using biotechnology. But the latter idea has three really big problems. First is that one organ in the, every organ in the body that is transplanted, eventually you completely remove all the organs and you have a completely new system. But if you got a heart transplant, you'd say you got a heart transplant. But if you got a brain transplant, you wouldn't say you got a brain transplant. The brain would say it had a body transplant. So it's really telling about how we view identity. The philosopher Bernard Williams asks you to consider that you were kidnapped by an evil scientist, or swaps her brain out with somebody else's, and then you have to choose which body he's going to torture. Would you have him torture your own body or the body you swapped your brain with? Would you feel it, or would you rather it happen to your empty body? It's actually more complicated of an answer than you might realize, because we know that the mind is going to experience the torture, but if you know you're going to get your body back, it becomes complicated. Desires, fears, ambitions, and goals, your memories and personality don't come from your body, they come from your brain, but the way you process them do. The second problem with body theory is that the ship of Theseus doesn't really come and doesn't apply to humans. While our bodies do replace the stomach lining every few days, our skin cells every few weeks, there is one group of cells that never get changed up, the neurons. However, what if you replaced each neuron in your brain with an artificial neuron, such that your brain functionality was preserved one at a time, and each one was taught to function and do exactly what a normal neuron does? Would you preserve to have tiny microscopic robots that travel through your bloodstream that can go up to your brain, engage with the cortex, and switch out your neurons one by one? Would your brain then become this Theseus ship? This is a famous idea called the Moravec transfer. The Moravec transfer, and it's probably the strongest argument for the preservation of identity, because it actually allows us to conceive of ourselves as becoming machines one step at a time, and brings us to the third problem of the body theory, which is if you create a replica of Theseus' ship, How would you tell them apart from one another? If you use the Moravec transfer to make multiple copies of your brain, then which copies would be clearly you? And that's some aspects of your identity which aren't as interchangeable as neurons. The mind or soul theory of identity was pioneered by Plato and adopted by major religions like Christianity and Islam 500 years later. Plato was the first to argue that our identity is not material because we have the capacity to understand immaterial things, just like numbers, geometric shapes, and abstract concepts like justice. So therefore, there must be some part of the human body that's also immaterial, like the soul or the Geist, that only immaterial things can access immaterial things. It's an interesting speculation, but the philosopher René Descartes wondered how you'd reconcile a material thing like a body with an immaterial thing like a soul or mind, and this is called the mind-body problem, and Descartes dedicated his whole life to solving it before the Renaissance. We used to think of a person's identity as their soul, but as the mind's body problem suggests, there's two major issues with this idea of a mind or soul. One, you can't verify it, and two, you can't distinguish any individual soul from any other soul. How could you identify which material body belongs to which immaterial soul if souls have no material properties? What specific properties does a soul have that makes it yours? So, to speak for example, if your significant other came home from work today and acted just as they did normally, would you have no way of knowing whether or not their soul was replaced with somebody else's? Because the things like memories and personality are still located in the material brain. After all, your intentions, beliefs, desires, memories, and experiences are the only things necessary to define you, and they disappear even if you believe in reincarnation, right, with your soul. So there's no need for anything else in the aspect of material identity of the mind. That's an important difference, and that's why it's talking about duplication of the mind and not the soul. A corresponding location in the brain, then why exactly would we need some immaterial soul to account for our identity? The immaterial soul serves another purpose. So the philosopher Jean Locke famously argued against Plato and Descartes, suggesting that every day God could destroy your soul at midnight and replace it with another, but you wouldn't be able to know if he was doing so if I went to sleep. And you woke up tomorrow and have no way to tell for sure that it had the same soul, so he couldn't bother to postulate its existence. The reason why John Locke is kind of weird to me. There's no more... Locke discovered the idea by looking into our legal systems and how they allocate punishments. If someone could remember having committed a crime and recall participating in the act, then they must be conscious of it and therefore responsible for it. So clearly it's the act of remembering who you are and what you did that gives your identity as a person. So you can't remember committing a crime, then be reincarnated and charged for it if you can't remember. You shouldn't be punished for a crime you can't remember because at the time you were quite literally a different person. If the body and soul and mind can't explain who we are, then maybe it had something to do with the continuity of our memories, as long as you don't live in some postmodern cyberpunk future where memories can be easily erased, implanted, or traded. Right? So then everything becomes confusing about crimes. But yet you're still responsible because habeas corpus. Then there's this theory is pretty good for creating a functional society. Likewise, if you want to save yourself from death, just upload your consciousness and memories to a computer. Unfortunately, that's not that simple because there are two really big problems with memory theory. The first is that we don't seem to recognize diseases like Alzheimer's or amnesia as somehow destroying someone's identity. Your father may have dementia, but he's still your father. People with amnesia aren't dead to us, so identity doesn't really seem to depend on memory either. The second problem is that memories aren't really reliable, and most of the time, we can't remember an event exactly the way it occurred. So how exactly are memories a stable category for identity if memories we have don't match up with reality? And then why bother trying to preserve them? What makes you think that you're the same person you were when you as a child if you can't even remember your childhood? It responds to the objections. Locke redefined the theory as less of a static collection of memories and more of a continuous chain of awareness. While you can't recall all your memories, you still have memories of yourself at different points, each memory connected to one another before, and then you have references of that. For example, I don't remember myself as a child, but I do remember myself as a teenager, and that teenager does remember me as a child. So for all intents and purposes, I am that child because the continuity chain of awareness wasn't actually broken up. Yes, I can't remember being a child, but the part of me that remembers being a teenager can. According to Locke, your consciousness would still be intact. Furthermore, Locke also makes a distinction between a person and a human being. Because in order to be the same human being, all we need to do is keep our mind and body and soul. However, to be the same person, we need to have the same continuity of consciousness to this very day. And we still have trouble locating things like consciousness and memory in the brain, though not for lack of trying. Neuroscientists like Giulio Tononi have proposed an idea called integrated information theory, which describes consciousness as just some feedback loops between particles of our brain. For example, the cerebellum, which is in the tiny brain located at the back of our brains, has 4 times as many neurons as the neocortex, but it doesn't mean it's more conscious than the neurons of the neocortex. It might be if you were a number, but if you're to give a number, but they're more connected to each other. They're more integrated, and thus they're more complex. Mathematically, it still doesn't really present a perfect theory. If we claim things like consciousness and memory are equal to integrated information of a system, then the description is still limited to a given time period. It seems kind of post hoc to stipulate that neural activity measured over 5 milliseconds is somehow literally our consciousness, but in reality our consciousness experiences actual shifts throughout the day overall. Locke makes one fatal assumption with his theory of identity. Just because a person operates perfectly fine without the existence of a soul, and they operate perfectly fine with the existence of without ego, really means that the self is not necessarily the same as the ego or the soul. This brings us to the 4th big paradigm shift. By the way, that's exactly what the Egyptians believe. The soul is separate, and there's the Ka, and I almost feel like I have to show that. Egyptian soul, Ka. Egyptian concept of the soul. You've got the sum of the bodily parts, and you have the 3 parts, right? There's more. Even the physical body, spiritual body, the name, identity, the personality. The double is your Ka, is like, there's another thing that's associated with the material realm as you. The heart, the shadow, and the power form. So it's interesting because, again, when we talk about how some cultures have 7, the Hebrews had 7 words for gold. Eskimos have 50 words for snow. Greeks have 7 words for love. Egyptians have, 8 words for soul? 9 words for soul? What? 3, 6, 9, 10? No way. Really? That's crazy. So they've been thinking about the soul a lot more than we have. So let's get back to artificial intelligence, because it's not just about artificial intelligence, it's about identity. Technically, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, actually beat Locke by about 2,000 years with a similar philosophy, suggesting the bundle theory says that we're all placed in some kind of bundle of experiences, a grouping of conscious perceptions which can change at any point throughout the day. While it does agree that we live out our lives in a chain of memories, it stresses that there's no actual ego that emerges from those memories under bundle theory. The ego is just a container, and only the thoughts themselves ever truly exist. Consciousnness doesn't have a specific location in the brain because consciousness is actually everywhere outside the human body. And humans are conscious, humans are conscious, rocks are conscious, trees are conscious. So if everything is conscious, then what makes you conscious? Really, you're the awareness you're just something that's using consciousness that's everywhere else. Special. It's still just a bundle of thoughts which come and go as they please, whether you're there or not, and you don't have any control or necessarily free will. You are not the one generating these thoughts because those thoughts are predetermined according to Hume, and our identity is not exactly permanent. And even Locke's chain of consciousness can be interrupted by anesthesia, dreamless sleep, or being knocked out, or simply getting blackout drunk. Siddhartha called this anatta, or the non-self, the continuously evolving flow of awareness that we only really notice through meditation, for example. Consider the hemispherectomy, a surgery where a person can actually survive having half their brain removed, and hypothetically the other half could go on living if it was placed in a new body. So what if I cut half of Jack and half of Jill's brain and put half of Jack's brain in Jill and put half of Jill's brain in Jack? Hemispherically inside Jill and Jack's left hemisphere and inside. Who would be who? If I took away 50% of your consciousness, then are you the same person, yes or no? If I took away 70% or 90%, where do you draw the line? This thought experiment debunks the idea that consciousness can somehow belong to someone what David Hume and the Buddha saw in the Buddha were trying to tell us. There's no clear point at which your consciousness goes from being one person to another person. For more evidence, look no further than the case of Phineas Gage, a laborer who took a railroad spike to the head. After the spike pierced his brain, she mysteriously managed to survive, but the vessel containing his spike, he survived, but containing his consciousness, his vessel containing his consciousness was not quite the same. This is evidenced by the fact that Gage used to be contentious, a conscientious, polite, and hard worker, but after the accident, he became irritated and short-tempered. So what's the big takeaway here? The bundle theory essentially means that you don't have to worry about the loss of consciousness when uploading a mind, because insofar as uploading mind is just as capable of holding thoughts, it might as well be just as meaningful, and it's separate from consciousness. However, believe it or not, the bundle theory is unfounded assumptions. How exactly do we distinguish this bundle from what we call the mind from any other possible mind in the universe? What if you were able to hook your mind up to another person's mind and have the exact same thoughts at once? Would your identity disappear then? There's the idea of multiverse, an infinite number of copies of you, and thinking that the same things that you're thinking right now could be thought by other versions of you or other beings that are in the same symmetrical arrangement in the Boltzmann brain. Even if multiverse theory is wrong, there are still multiverses in our own universe by the idea that there are many people that are, everything is symmetrically similar. The universe is an infinitely large, and things are more likely to symmetry is more likely to happen. Asymmetry is less likely to happen. Certain things happen, other things don't happen as regularly. The universe is a infinitely large place, at least in terms of holographic stacking. And if you just travel, well, let's skip this part. Who cares? They bring us to the psychological terror of casualty theory or personnel identity, pioneered by philosopher Derek Parfit. Argued that there's no reason that bodies, minds, consciousness, or thoughts should define our identity. I'm going to skip ahead a bit on this one. Let me see. Where am I at there? So, looking at the reason I'm bringing all these ideas... Is this going to open? The reason I'm bringing up all these ideas about consciousness and mind reset and mind uploading really comes down to some of the stuff we talked about yesterday. And so I'm going to be careful how I go into it. But I'll start with, first off, density, holograms, the idea that everything is stacked up on top of itself. So we're living in a flat plane where every moment is actually that seems further out in distance or further out in time, which is a form of distance, is really singularly stacked on top of itself. And there's a density of radio. So that's a big thing. Now I'm going to talk about Varaha. Okay. So Varaha is the avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. Yesterday I was talking about my pig story, which was, pigs in space. I still have that up somewhere. I want that picture back. I like that picture. Pigs in space. So the thing about pigs in space, right, and my story, which you can listen to on Odyssey at the end of the video, I'm going to cut a piece of it and probably put it up just as its own thing, was about, I said snowflake, but it was about Snowbell. I remembered later. I was like, it's Snowbell. It was the name of the pig at the fair, because there's a number of pigs that were owned by kids and farmers. One had been named Snowbell. You got your race at the fair. And so I told the story about, and you can hear it another time, but the thing is, I talked about Ganesh, and there's a connection to Ganesh as well, but the thing is, Ganesh is connected to Varaha. And so Varaha is the boar god, but really the avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. And it gets us into this whole idea of mind uploading. Because with the story of the Varaha, let me just see if I can pull this here. Hold on. Make that bigger. Is that good? Yeah. So the Varaha is, he holds the world up. That's him holding the world up right there. And he pulled the world up out of the underworld. And so here's Varaha, avatar of Vishnu, killing a demon to protect the earth, and the earth goddess Bu or Bhudevi, which eventually he ends up marrying Bhudevi. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this Varaha character and what it means to be an avatar. So Varaha is the let me just jump. Where did I put that thing right there? Is it here? Okay. Varaha is said to be taken taking the boar form to slay the demon of Naraka. In the Brahmanda Purana, realizing that the earth was in the waters, he decided to take the form of Varaha as the beast likes to sport in the water. Similarly, reasons for taking the boar from particular are given in the Lingua Purana. Varaha placed beneath the earth the world elephants, and the serpent Shisha and the world turtle as support. Vishnu Purana and the Markandeya Purana adds that the Brahma Narayana decides to take the form of the Varaha, similar to the form of the fish for the Matsya and the tortoise for the Kurma. Tortoise is Kurma. I like it. He took in previous kalpas. In the Vishnu Narayana, who unambiguously became the pig god and bore avatar Varaha to lift the sunken earth from the waters. His 4 feet represent the Vedas of scripture. His tusks represent sacrifice stakes. His teeth are offerings. His mouth is the altar. The tongue is the sacrificial fire. The hair on his head denotes the sacrificial grass. The eyes represent the day and the night. The head represents the seat of all. The mane represents the hem of the Vedas. His nostrils are his obligations. His joints represent the various ceremonies. The ears are said to indicate the rites, voluntary or obligatory. Okay, so also, let me see if I can find something here that I was just looking at yesterday. I thought was really interesting. Let's see, Quran. Where's that Quran verse at? Quran. So in the Quran, I found yesterday. Where is it at? Well, I'll just type it in and see if we can find it, shall we? Quran turning humans into pigs. Okay, so you go here. God made man into pigs as a penalty, right? Is actually a part of the Quran. He turned them into apes, and he turned them into pigs. This is like the most clear example we have of a biblical kind of book or some religious book telling us this story. God, devolution. God cursed those who transgress, saying, "Be apes and be pigs." So basically, these guys weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They weren't keeping the commandments, and he was like, "All right, well then, be pigs." And that's something to consider also in this little story there. So there's another thing about Varaha, which is he married the goddess, which I think I've got. Where's this at? I got the picture there somewhere, right? Did I lose it? I don't know where it is. Varaha wife. Varaha wife. Consort. Bhudevi, right? Yeah, there she is. So Bhudevi. And there's another one too. Like he's got another one who is the world, and she's this like flat world. I don't know where the picture went, but you start to see these pictures of worshipped pigs everywhere that are. And the reason that they say that Vishnu took the form of this boar was because he couldn't burrow, and the world underneath. He was trying to keep the demons underneath, and he wanted to lift the underworld that held the world out and keep it from being stuck. Let me see. Let me pull this out here. There we go. Here's the pig statue that we're looking at, and Vishnu had to fight. Okay. Also, here's another really quick one I wanted to pull up that was kind of related to this idea that we're going into, and it's kind of silly, but it was interesting. John describes certain animals inhabit the throne room of God. This idea that there's certain animals that are associated, and you're like, what is this? What is he reading with this? Cats as messengers. I saw something like angels or something like that. Divine messengers. Cats as divine messengers. Totems, spirit guides. All these like websites are kind of showing you this idea, and you're like, what is this all about? Well, and then there's temples of Bastet, because we're looking into the goddess. Or we're looking at the gods and goddesses of Egypt, and a lot, like for instance, Ra and Aten, who were supposed to be henotheistically, we're supposed to say, oh, Aten's the most important god, there's no other gods. Well, in his side, you find Bastet temples. So they were okay with the Bastet temple. And the idea that Bastet helped the god. And so the rays, again, remember Aten is the rays of light. So the idea that this thing is helping, is being helped by, or vice versa, this thing, the idea that all cats have the spirit of this Bastet in them, and that they're ambassadorially connected to the original source of this energy, right? And that's where their consciousness is coming from. And you see that they've got the symbols for this kind of antenna Ankh, which is even more powerful than the regular Ankh. So kind of important to notice that there's this idea of these avatars, right? And then so in my little paper thing, I talked a little bit, I wrote this down. Where's my bit about, there's a new video game coming out, Avatar PS5, that's going to be about, you can the characters of Avatar who have their Akashic record, and they have kind of a reincarnation thing, and they're a tribe. But it's a bit more nihilist and atheist so far. We're waiting to see what happens because they couldn't make the sequel, and now they're going to make. I mean, maybe they are, but I think they're going to make the game more important than the sequel because I think people want that more. And the story is going to be about this idea, really, that there's a data that's being transmitted that seeds the consciousness of these beings. It gives them what they're first able to think about, right? So Avatar Vishnu. Let's look at that and see. Wiki. So the idea is you've got a concept within Hinduism that it means descent, like it descends from. It signifies the material appearance or incarnation of a deity on earth. The relative verb to alight, to make one's appearance, is sometimes used to refer to any guru or revered human being. So this is, it's a post-Vedic term that was developed around the 6th century, and so it's a more modernization. But there are these ideas of the Lord appearing through these different consciousnesses in different ways, and that these are highly advanced, nearly immortal beings that are all-knowing. So the idea is almost the same as saying, and also that they're stars. They're stars that seed data into beings, okay? And so we talked earlier about it, but I'm going to show you again. The Dyson sphere idea, that you've got this super consciousness, which is able to utilize the power of a star, of the sun, or whatever it is, in order to transmit data. And that then you have this idea of mind uploading. We've been talking about mind uploading a little bit, but let's get a little bit more clear on what it means. Mind uploading, also known as whole brain emulation, is a theoretical futuristic process of scanning a physical structure of the brain accurately enough to create an emulation of the mental state, transferring a copy to a computer in a digital form. There's another kind here that I need to look up, minduploading.org, something like that. There we go. Once it is possible to move a mind from one substrate to another, it is then called a substrate-independent mind. The concept of SIM is inspired by the idea of designing software that can run multiple computers with different hardware without needing to be rewritten. Okay, and then let's pull open my little page here. I've got some stuff about materialism and, I think I got a video I wanted to show you guys really quickly. Hold on a second. Let me show you this.
It's in imagined cases that these different views start disagreeing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've mentioned one already, a brain transplant. Suppose each half of your brain is successfully transplanted into the empty skull of, let's call them, your identical twin siblings, so that the body is exactly similar. Well, two people would wake up. Each of them has half your brain, seems to remember living your life, is psychologically just like you. What happens to you? Now, some people say, well, it's death, you cease to exist. I think that's the right way to describe it.
It's not a regular form of death.
It's not a regular form of death. Now, another way of describing it is to say, I would still exist, only now I'd have two minds and two bodies. But that really strains the notion of a person. I mean, suppose in my two halves I go off, live at opposite ends of the earth, meet the other half of myself many years later. I don't even realize that I'm talking to the other half of me. We play tennis, I think it's someone else over there, but actually it's me. I don't think we could accept that. Well then, if we admit...
Well, they're two me's, aren't they? One me went that way, one me went that way. While we're together, we're an us.
Well, but they aren't one and the same person. Because there are two of them, okay?
Yes.
So if we admit that there are two different people, each of whom has half my brain and is psychologically just like me, if they're two different people, they can't each be one and the same person, me. It'd be absurd to suppose that I'm one of them and not the other. No reason to suppose that. So I think we should conclude, yes, neither of them would be me. I would cease to exist.
Yeah.
But the point is, my relation to each of them would contain everything that matters. We can take one of the standard science fiction cases, we're called teletransportation, in which you imagine what happens. You go into a cubicle on Earth.
Yeah.
A scanner maps the state of all the cells in your brain and body, destroying your brain and body while it does it. Then the information is beamed, say, to Mars, where a replicator makes a perfect organic copy of your brain and body. Someone wakes up on Mars, thinking he's you, exactly like you in character, memory, everything. Now, many people think that teletransportation is just the fastest way of traveling. You travel at the speed of light. But others think, no, it's a way of dying. They kill you, and then on Mars they make a replica. They make someone who's exactly similar, but won't be you. Now, many people assume that it is just a way of traveling. I mean, they follow Star Trek and so on. I think it's not too hard to show that you're making a mistake if you think, oh yes, it would be me waking up on Mars. And one way of bringing that out is to take what I call the branch line case. Suppose I enter the cubicle again on Earth, press the button, nothing seems to happen. I walk out, what's gone wrong? Isn't working. Technician says, we've been having some trouble, he says, with these machines. Though it records your states accurately, it damages the bodies that it scans. In a few days, I'm afraid to say, you'll be dead. But don't worry, you on Mars will take up where you leave off. Your book will be finished, your children cared for, all your ambitions will be fulfilled.
Excuse me, I think something's gone wrong with your machine.
Yes, sir. I'm very sorry. There has been a mistake.
Mistake?
But you have actually traveled to Mars.
That's not me. It's just a large television screen.
No, sir, that's you.
I'm still here, miss. On Earth.
No, there has been a mistake and there has been a delay, but you're going to be destroyed anyway in 4 minutes. But everything is fine. You have traveled to Mars.
Thank you. Look, I just wanted to say that.
If I was in his shoes, it wouldn't matter to me that my copy on Mars had all my memories. I would still be going to die. This was a serious blow to the idea that I was my memories.
The fact that my replica has all my memories and is in every other way just like me psychologically, that isn't enough to make him me. And that's brought out both by the case in which they make him while I'm still alive, and by the fact that if they can make one replica with the information, they could make 100 all at the same time. Now, I wouldn't be 100 different people who each seem to remember living my life. I wouldn't even be 2 of them, but 100 is clearly too much. So memory doesn't, in that sense, guarantee identity. I think we discover that we think that we are the kind of entity that must either exist or not exist. There must always be a definite answer to the question, will it be me? Now, I think that might have been true. It would be true if what each of us really was was a soul, a Cartesian ego or immaterial substance. Because souls thought of that way were thought of as like what atoms were once thought to be. That's to say, they're ultimate and they're indivisible, and either it exists or it doesn't. Whether it exists or not is always a clear-cut matter. Now, even people who don't believe in the soul, and that's true of many, probably most people today, they still think about their own identity, whether I shall wake up again, in a way that I think could only be justified if there were souls, if that's what each of us really was. I mean, take Hume's example, the analogy between a person and a nation. A nation consists in a group of people living together on a territory. Now, I don't think the nation is that territory, and I don't think the nation is that group of people. But the existence of a nation doesn't involve anything over and above a group of people living on a territory. And that's the way I think we should think about person. I'm not just this physical object. I'm not a series of experiences. But there's nothing more to my existence than a series of thoughts and experiences that are closely connected to this body.
And I'd met that man. Some said the world's greatest living philosopher, the man who devoted his life to studying the self.
I think the early Buddhist view was largely that much or most of the misery of human life resulted from the false view of self. We take the simplicity of the concept I and of the self, and we just read it into reality.
Derek Parfit of All Souls on Here. It was like this. He used to clock in every day for 14 years. But all he seemed to do was just go into his room. I mean, the hope was he was thinking, but it became a bit of a scandal. People said, well, shouldn't Derek actually do something? I mean, shouldn't he meet a student in the older lecture? I don't know. Anyway, someone's dispatched to tell him the thinking, and he said, oh, all right. He said, I'll write a book. A year later, he came out with this, Reasons and Persons. Apparently this puts him up there with the big uns, you know? I don't know, Plato, Kant, Nietzsche, Heidegger. All that remained was for me to go and see him.
Buddha said, "O brothers, there are actions and also their consequences, but there is no agent. There is no individual, it is just a name given to a set of elements." So that on that view, what we have to realize is that we don't exist. Well, that's unnecessarily paradoxical. We do exist, but I think what we need to discuss is not whether the self exists at all, but what kind of thing it is.
But what kind of thing is it then?
Well, the main debates have all been about the question, what makes it true that it will be me who still exists, say, in some time in the future, or you?
Well, yeah, you got my point. So that was Derek Parfit. Sometimes he's a little much. I think he's dead. Maybe he's alive, but he's a cool guy. Yeah, he's all right. Really quickly, I almost forgot to tell you guys, my shirts are on sale. Go to andreas.me/store or xirtus.com/store, or you can just go down and click on the link here to the t-shirt, and the t-shirt will take you to the big store. This is the big boy store, the big girl store. This is the big transgender store. Everybody can be here. And there's a lot of cool stuff here, fancier stuff, leggings of all varieties. I got crazy leggings and designs, and there's Tartaria, Mudwave socks, and fanny packs, and etc. But if also go to the TeePublic link, you'll find the new Xirtus shirt, posters, the sardonic "this time it will work" shirt, which is great for you, or especially for your friends if you're trying to connect with some people that look at the world differently, or get yourself an Xirtus shirt or Tartaria blimp, So on sale now. Check that out. Get yourself some merch. And thanks again for the super chats. So we're talking a bit about Varaha. and we're talking about this idea of the identity of the soul, and this idea of like, okay, identity versus soul. If this thing is the nation, and it's a supercomputer, and it can upload memory stacks, and you can start every single one of your citizens off, your individuals off with a certain amount of data. And we do this already, or life does this. Let's look at Starship Troopers. In Starship Troopers, the idea is that there are these bugs, right? And the bugs have they have exactly what they need. They already know what they need to know. There's a hive brain bug, and the brain bug is able to telekinetically teletransport data into the minds of these sentinels, right? So animal sentinels. And so this idea of animal sentinels is, well, that's not what I mean exactly, but that there are, and this is where you get into the people that say birds aren't real thing. Like, I mean, and as silly as it is, it's the point of this might be, the gestalt is there. There might be something. I mean, I don't know. I haven't really talked to these guys, so I have to talk to them more. I'm not one of the birds aren't real people. I don't believe in the word hoax or unreal, really. I don't believe in truth in that sense of that something is untrue. It's more that from a point like this, I don't believe. But in terms of, I mean, maybe. Okay. If you really want to go there, do these exist? Has someone made fake birds? Yeah, sure. But are all birds fake? No. But the idea though that animals are sentinels, Egyptian animal sentinels, it's this idea that these animals have been sent with the memories of these gods to an extent, and that they're here to monitor us, here to observe us. And it's kind of like, some religions have saints, while the Egyptians have these animals all around us, which are the signs of the gods, and that they're the special genetic code or whatever that the gods have sent down here, so that those are their sentinels, and they can do nothing more than worship. So in a lot of ways, this idea of the angel, which cannot make choices other than to do what it's inherently designed to do, even if that is kind of like to eat the dead or something, or to dolphins or something. There could be, I don't think is a dolphin. I think some dolphins might have a Sumerian god, but the Egyptians I don't think have a dolphin god. Do they? Let's find that out. Egyptian dolphin god. I have no idea, to be honest. I'm curious. Anybody? Yeah. Neterontimui. Neterontimui. It was a modern invention. Come on. Yeah, I knew that wasn't a thing. Come on. So, but this idea that the boars were Vishnu's avatar, and that they're not. Oh man, that's what's going on. Hold on. There's a door that's flinging open in the wind. I was like, what is happening? There we go. I thought there was like someone trying to get in the house, and I was like, what is this? But there's like a lot of wind outside. So, but this idea, and then we're told also that pigs are dangerous, pigs are bad. Some people were turning to pigs. You shouldn't eat pigs. Let's talk really quickly about Hog's Bay to get into this idea a little bit further. Hog's Bay, Bermuda. But if you go to almost any place around the world, you'll see Hog's Bay, Pig's Bay, Bay of Pigs, blah, 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 blah. What's up with all the Hog's Bays? Especially in places where the Portuguese and Sephardic traders and Arabs were at. You'd think, that why would a Muslim want a Hog's Bay? Why would someone who doesn't eat pork want a Hog's Bay? Well, people who didn't eat pork thought of pork as bad and dangerous, but they also knew that it was a great weapon. So the diseases that could be spread. And there's a lot of things about, this is funny, the Bay of Pigs invasion. Let's see, what's it? Papua New Guinea. Did it again. Spreading my letters in all the wrong direction. New Guinea, pigs, swine, parasites. So somebody came with pigs, because pigs aren't indigenous to Papua New Guinea. They dropped them off. They came back a couple years later. The brilliant Sirius star sexadecimal math using people were all suffering from parasites from the pigs, which caused brain damage, disease-inducing parasites that actually shorten their lives and mess with the quality of their life. And this is just one example that we can find everywhere. But this idea that they're putting hogsbays, that they put hogsbays places, not for themselves to eat food, but so that they could take over the locals. So there's a big thing here with that, this idea that the pigs are involved with the taking over the locals. Now, looking back, though, at the Veda, and the Veda doesn't tell you to eat pigs. It just tells you that their god came as a pig, amongst other other beings. But it does say that he fought off the demons. So a little bit about the pig. Let me get to the demon. Slayer of demons. Subterranean realm. Let's do this one. Brahma Purana, the Venkata Kala Mahatma in the Vaishnava Kanda book of the Skanda Purana and in the Vishnu Smriti narrate the tale with slight variation. However, Brahma is missing in it. In it, Vishnu Narayana, who unambiguously becomes Varaha to lift the sunken earth from the waters. In the late addition to the Mahabharata, the single-tusked Eka Shringa Varaha, identified with Narayana Vishnu, lifts the earth, which sinks under the burden of overpopulation when Vishnu assumes the deities of Yama, the god of death. Okay, so also the god of death is associated with the pig. So his duties are taken over by the pig. And I told you he donates teeth because he's lost one of his tusks, and he's also in charge of sacrifices, and he is the sacrifice. It's a very Vishnu moment. So the Harivamsa at the beginning of the Kalpa, Vishnu creates various worlds from the cosmic egg. We're gonna do some about this golden egg. I'll do a whole episode on that because that's a lot. But suffice it to say, I think you get the idea. The golden egg associated with the golden peacock, Twili Malek and the Yazidi. There's a lot there to Manichaeism and the idea of the cosmic golden egg. It's a thing. There's like a Gaia special, I'm sure. I'll do it better. The earth's unable to bear the weight of the new mountains and losing their energy sinks in the waters to the subterranean realm of Rastala. Okay, so because of population, I think is the reason it says it in the Rastala, in the Brahma Purana. The abode of the demons. In the first account of the Bhagavata Purana states that in the early stages of creation, Brahma created various beings. However, finds the earth under the waters. Varaha, identified with Vishnu, the Lord of Sacrifice, emerges as a tiny beast the size of a thumb from the nostrils of Brahma, but soon grows and grows. And Varaha's size increases to that of an elephant, and then to that of an enormous mountain. You can see where I would get. This is kind of funny, like the things that cross in my brain sometimes. Like yesterday, I confused Herophilus with Hemophilus, right? Herophilus. Because he studied blood, and if you look at, what blood is, hemo in Greek, so I was thinking hemo. It's funny, sometimes the things that cross in my mind, I don't know. Totally aside. The Varaha is described as 10 yojanas. Yojanas are a measure of distance that was used in ancient India, about 15 kilometers. The range of yojanas is disputed, range between 6 to 15. Great. The width of 1,000 yojanas in height. He is large as a mountain and blazing like the sun. Okay, so when we talk also about Stellium 7 in his video series about Titans, you get into this idea that there are avatars that took over the form of Titans, right? They were Sentinels with the minds controlled. This is so far from what they want me to be talking about. I'm so not you guys, but they. Okay, so really quickly, just to make sure that I keep pulling it back to something that I'm allowed to talk about. See, wait, they're scared. Let's get into something really quickly. Oh, is it frozen? That's hilarious. All right, well, we're going to go back for a second then. I'm going to talk about pattern recognition systems a little bit more and different ways that intelligence work, because intelligence can easily be, you have instinctual intelligence, and we talked a little bit of developmental cognizance in humans, but there's other kinds of intelligence that are important. Let me see if I can open it in this window, because that one seems to hate me now. Crossing fingers. It's like frozen. Everything. Oh, great. Is this like this is one of those things where like my videos start to freak out on me? And yeah, just remember, guys, be good mods in there, or else there can be changes made in the kingdom. Okay, well, this is hyper frustrating that my paper's just been shut out from me being able to read it. Oh dear. Well, I could read it from my phone or something like that. I guess I could do that or something. Okay, let me see if I can kind of cover the things I'm trying to talk about. Because I think it's still working, because last time this happened to me, I talk too long and it starts to screw me over. And someone says, let's talk about Pig Bay. Yeah, we can do talks about Pig Bay, but Hogs Bay, Pigs Bay, Bay Pigs, this stuff does come up a lot. I'll want to kind of focus on the hive mind thing, though. Let me just get to... Where's my pig document? Pigs in space. A little further down. Okay, brain. Mind uploading. Okay, we're getting there again. I think it's gonna be fine. Is it loaded yet? No. Yeah, this is crazy. Exit pages. See if that helps. Reload. Yeah, no, it's okay. Great, it's back. I was just like, what the heck? I think I had a memory problem or something like that. Okay, so pigs in space loading. So talk about the Tonfei. Thanks for the super chats. Trying to remember to do all my important intro things. We cannot copy brains, a Kurzweil thing. Let's talk about that really quickly. Why you can't just copy brains? I'm going to just reiterate. You can't copy a brain. You can only take the memories. I think I kind of explained that with the psychology of this, that you can do a lot, but slowly what will happen is you'll start to replace parts of the brain until the system still can function in a new system. And that's what's going to happen. That's why transhumanism is so important to AI, because they have to learn how to be a part of the system that they're going to eventually sever themselves from. So in terms of, if we care more about just train spikes generated by neurons, the challenge becomes even more greater. How does it compare with the human brain? Neurons of the human brain or of any biological brain are not simply spiking neurons. As we zoom and examine composition of biological neurons, we take note of the intricacy of the biological machinery, and that each individual neuron is in fact an incredibly complex biological entity. To capture all of its behavior might require analysis and simulation down to the molecular level, or even beyond to a subatomic level, if we care about every possible environmental effect that interaction with the neuron can have. Right? And so we don't even realize, as we get deeper and deeper into things, and this is something that I know not everyone knows about atomism, they're the same thing. But you get deeper and deeper through the synapse, and this is a beautiful truth that there's a Horton, here's a who in everything. Like everything, you go deeper, there is systematic synchronicity, and the shapes start to reemerge. And granted, maybe the shapes we're being told are off, and everyone's like, that's not what a cell looks like inside. But no, I mean, dude, like, look at some pictures. Use a scanning electron microscope. So the point is, the trade-off is you will not end up with the original thing, not for a long time, until the original thing doesn't exist anymore, in the sense that the human mind will never be a copy, but the transhumanist mind will. And the human mind will be the basis for AI, because it will be easy enough to understand at least the intricacies of how the system functions to make a new system that can make similar results. It's also about oracle programming. And I mentioned this earlier, but don't do this to me. Don't do this. Computing. Not corporation. Processes. No. Oracle. Science. They're getting Oracle machine. In complexity theory and computability theory, an Oracle machine is an abstract machine used to study decision problems. It can be visualized as a Turing machine with a black box called the Oracle, which is able to solve certain problems in a single operation. The problem can be of any complexity class, even undecidable problems such as a halting problem. So in old computers, you'd have chips that did specific calculations. You might, instead of having one computer that just does everything on the CPU, you'd plug in a chip for every little feature. Something that can process video would have its own VGA chip. Another thing that could do voices would be a vocoder chip. It would have every single sound would be associated with one of the transistors, and you would flip them mechanically. So there are all kinds of black box Oracle machines that can work to decide and to access the data set. So you have the data set, and you have machines. You can have a number of servers and black boxes that can access the data. So this is the beginning of this idea of substrate independent mind, but also the idea that you could have data that's being understood by hive mind and swarm mind. So like hive mind AI. Let's jump into this really quickly. Wiki. Anybody? Anything? Hive mind. Group mind may refer to collective consciousness, collective intelligence, group mind, science fiction, group think, sheeple, swarm intelligence is the other one we're going to look at in a second, and the egregore and the universal mind. So the egregore is this kind of wakefulness, awareness, wokeness from the esoteric schools, the Gnostic schools, and the Enochian tradition, and you can think of it as a connection to Akashic records, but it's a bit cooler, in my opinion, is the egregore. People don't talk about it enough. It's more about the tapping into the consciousness and this idea that your brain attached to your nervous system is the antenna, but the data is everywhere else, and everywhere else as opposed to anywhere else, because that's the difference in the Akashic record, is that the Akashic record has to do with this great connectivity, whereas the egregore has to do more with the space, the empty space. So the empty space is that connectivity. So the concept of egregore powers has its roots in the Book of Enoch. The dude who doesn't die walks with God and talks with angels, and the Book of Giants is based on by Manny, which we'll get to in another episode. Later, the term and concept found its way into other languages. The manuscript found in Saragossa, which is 1761 to 1815, Count Jan Potocki narrated from the time of the Napoleonic Wars. Novel in French in the Russian Empire in the 19th century features the term egregores to refer to the most illustrious of the fallen angels. The term egregore was also used by the French poet Victor Hugo in Legend des siècles, The Legend of the Ages, where he uses the word egregore at first as an adjective, then as a noun, while leaving the meaning obscure. Eliphas Levi, the Le Grand Arcane, the Great Secret, 1868, identifies egregores with the tradition concerning the Watchers, the fathers of the Nephilim, describing them as terrible beings that crush us without pity because they're unaware of our existence. Okay, so again, with this not necessarily being the greatest thing, when you think of the Watchers, the angels who came down, and that's that idea that the angels were watching the whole time and couldn't interact as much. This idea of the Sentinels, right? And that some of them have great data. Some of these beasts are highly advanced. Jainism, let me see if I can get into Jainism for a second. Is this going to work? Jainism, we talked about this a long time ago in the first videos we talked about. A very ancient religion, older than Hinduism. It talks about the substances of the universe, the six eternal substances, the sentient being soul, non-sentient substrate being Pudgala or matter, the principle of motion, dharma, the principle of rest, ad-dharma, space, akasha, and time, kala. So the last five are united as the ajiva, the non-living, and James distinguishes substance from a complex body or thing by declaring the form or a simple indestructible element, while the latter is a compound made of one, or the former to be an indestructible element, though the latter is a compound made of one or more substances that can be destroyed. And another thing that's important about them is their idea of the soul. They don't eat, they don't kill when they eat. They only eat, they'll eat the fruits of a tree without killing the tree. I imagine it would be like if a meat eater only ate fingernails, right, or hair. They don't eat anything that kills the thing that it comes from. They don't like to eat things from underground. And they try to eat things from the tree line. Above the tree line is the sattvic, and there's like another layer that's near the ground, just 3 feet from below the ground above, from the ground level up, and then beyond that in the tree level is even more ideal, more ethereal. So then they talk about the reason. It has to do with the vitalities, and it's because these things only have one sense. They have the 4 vitalities. The trees have sense of organ, of touch, strength of body and energy, respiration, life, duration. So you're not supposed to kill the thing, but you can eat its fingernails. You can eat the tree's limbs, its fruit. And then there's 2 sensed organisms, which are the 6 vitalities. They have the sense of taste and the organ of speech. And it's interesting, these shells that can sing, when you blow into them, they're saying that. 3 senses, the 7 vitalities, ants and insects that have the sense of smell and antennae can pick up things. 4 sense spiders, bees, arachnids have 8 vitalities, and they have the sense of sight. And this is very obvious to anyone who's looked at a spider. They have the most amazing eyes. Yeah, I do love spiders. And then 5 senses without the mind. And that's where you get into these reptilians, the water snake, that have 9 vitalities, of the sense of hearing, and there are these, you'd think that's where all the animals go, but no, because then comes 5 senses with the mind, which is humans, which is the 10 vitalities of mind. But really, in the long term, when you look at it, a lot of these animals are technically higher than, there's certain animals are technically higher in the vitality chart of the transmigration of the soul than the humans are. Elephants, cows, you know what I mean? There's a ton of these animals that are technically more so of mind according to this rule. So it's all this idea, again, of these sentinels. I want to jump in again also to my document on here's the 4 requirements of a whole brain emulation. You have a resolution and scope validation, structural connectosome, functional connectosome, and emulation platform. And these are all going to be completely different parts. So when we're talking about, this is why it's so interesting, the converger of all the technologies happening right now at once. You've got people that are trying to have digital thoughts in a human substrate, and organic substrate, and trying to have organic thoughts in a digital substrate, a mechanical substrate. And it's really interesting because that breaks all the rules that we've tried to say, oh, this is different than us, so we can't interact, which doesn't work very well. Then you can get into memory stacking and mind uploading complications. So memory stacking in hierarchical networks, robust representations of sound with a complex spectro-temporal structure are thought to emerge in hierarchical organized auditory cortex, but the computational advantage of this hierarchy remains unknown. And so this is another interesting thing about hierarchy. What happens when you have a system of memories outside of their order? How does it affect your interpretation of them? Clearly, it changes everything. If you hear a joke in a different order, if you find out something you didn't know, it changes the story. This is something that just happened recently, or I guess it was 2015. Oh, well, I just heard about this recently. Aldehyde stabilized cryopreservation is really important to the idea of cryopreservation of brain banking techniques for detailed brain ultrastructure over long time scales when they're trying to use glutaraldehyde dihyde to rapidly stabilize brain ultrastructure. And we're finding not only that this will be useful for cryogenics, to freeze bodies after they're dead, but that it can be used to create robust general-purpose brain banking protocol for connectomics research, where such procedure must provide the highest quality of ultrastructural preservation with minimal distortion, easily scale to brain of any size, enable indefinite storage of whole brains with no ultrastructural change during storage, and remain compatible with as many anatomical assays as possible. So copying the human brain in the most emulating the human brain in the best way that they can requires really a 3D model of everything that has everything functioning inside of a video game physics engine to produce synapse control with, I think it's 400 billion flops is the new computer that they're trying to build. Okay, but let's also jump. I mentioned bundle theory. I want to go over that a little bit quicker. Integrated theory and narrative identity. I mentioned narrative identity, but I'm gonna go a little bit further. So bundle, Hume. According to the theory, an object consists of its properties and nothing more. So how it's described, I'm gonna explain why that's illogical in a second. Integrated formation theory attempts to provide framework capable of explaining why some physical systems, such as human brains, are conscious. And this is an important one. In terms of how we understand consciousness, how we understand awareness, and how we understand application of data, which is, I think, an important thing, which is intrinsic existence, composition, information, integration, and exclusion, which is important also, this idea that something is not. It's I and thou. I mentioned his name earlier, Giulio Tononi. I think you should research some of his stuff. I'll see if I can get in touch with him. He's an interesting guy. Narrative identity. Well, this is a picture of me. It's not me, but it's a picture taken of me when I was younger, and so it's me. Narrative identity. The idea that we describe something and it is the thing. Okay, so really quickly, what's wrong with these theories? Let's say that someone thinks they're Napoleon, and they're walking around telling you that they're Napoleon, and you won't believe it, right? And everyone says, well, he's not Napoleon, but he believes he's Napoleon, or she, and you have a conflict there, because then you're saying this person is not Napoleon, but who are they? Well, are they the person who's not Napoleon? Because eventually they believe they're Napoleon so much that you're basically saying if they're not the thing that they say they are, then they have no identity. Not that their identity is false and that there's a true identity, because they don't know their identity, essentially. It's impossible for that to be their identity. And that's the irony of bundle theory. And so narrative theory makes more sense there. something worth looking at is also, let me get to my bit on hive mind. I pulled that up, right? Hive mind, okay. Hive mind, groupthink, sci-fi. Where's my sci-fi section? Is this hive mind in sci-fi? Group mind, science fiction. Okay. Gestalt intelligence, science fiction plot device. What did I just? The one that I was gonna look at that was legit. Oh, Chardin. No, that's not in there. It's not in here. There's no Chardin. Omega. No. What? Hive Mind Science Fiction has its own. Does it have its own wiki or something weird like that? Because Wikio. Hive Mind, Group Mind Science Fiction. Dude, it should be here, I think. I thought I had that right there. Hive Mind, Swarm Intelligence, technologically. Really? Swarm Intelligence should be somewhere, right? Well, let's get into swarm intelligence then. So swarm intelligence is different. Swarm intelligence, collective behavior, decentralized, self-organized systems, natural or artificial. The concept is employed in works of artificial intelligence, but you can think of swarming birds, bee colonies, ant colonies, bird flocks, hawk hunting, animal herding, bacterial growth, fish schooling, and microbial intelligence. So bacterial growth, microbial intelligence, we're going to get into that as well. That's a big thing on how this works, that something can be held together. In fact, on the more complicated systems, they're relying on the same technology as microbial intelligence, which confuses us because we wonder, are these cells cooperating through altruistic behavior or selfish behavior? But it doesn't really matter because at the end of the day, bacteria will cooperate. And through this, we're able to find colonies of bacteria. And if you want to look at anything that's really, I don't know how to put this, but it's just freedom. I don't know. I want to say this in a careful way because it might actually offend people but the idea of free will, I think the closest thing that we're going to find to free will might be in a bacterial colony optimizing its lack of entropy through collective intelligence. So something to look at there. Stigmergy, a mechanism of indirect coordination throughout the environment. Stigmergy is very important. You start to see paths built from pheromone traces. So they're naturally going towards the pheromones. It's just something that we wonder, is it self-organization because they want it to be or they just love that smell? It doesn't really matter because it leads to herd behavior. And herd behavior is slightly different than swarm behavior, but it's something to consider. Okay, so back to swarm intelligence, because swarm intelligence is slightly more than swarm behavior or herd behavior. It has to do with separation, alignment, cohesion, the ability to steer, avoid crowd-locked flock mates, steer towards the average headed of local flock mates, cohesion, steer to move toward the average position, center of mass of the local flock mates. So self-propelled particles, meta-heuristics, the idea that particle swarm operations are valuable to AI has led us to understand that in hive minds, this could be something as well. If you had a colony of super ants that were all intelligent and they had access to data and they were able to process data, they would be able to, for instance, not bring a sugar crystalline home to the queen to have her test it. They would be able to test it themselves. And this has been something that's with borax, right? Because you can do ants, borax, sugar. If you ever I've had some ants in my life, and I don't think you should murder ants if you can avoid it. But one thing you can do if you're having a lot of termites or a lot of ants, warm water, sugar, 3 parts, 1 part borax, mix it together, let it solute. When it ends up being dried out, then, or even actually it doesn't even have to be dried out, but the drying out will help, but you keep it at kind of a solution, I think is the best thing. Ants will come find this sweet borax-laced crystalline substrate, and they will take it back to the queen. And when they get back to the queen will eat the borax and will die. And this could all be avoided with greater swarm intelligence. So there's a lot to be said about the information that's coming out about artificial swarm intelligence and its connection to these concepts in the Veda with Sentinels. Let me go back again to show you the pictures. These characters, which are all-knowing, they have avatars, they have incarnate forms, but often can exist entirely metaphysically. And so that could, an easier explanation is technologically, and that they are more than their avatars, because they are the whole and complete sum of all of the data that's ever been processed by their nation or their state or their being. And their being is one singularity. These are the kinds of transhumanist concepts, post-humanist concepts that I think scare a lot of people, but it also explains a lot of this idea of how it's possible and what it even means, because it's so complicated when we look at these ancient texts that are talking about the avatars of Vishnu. What does it mean? And how do we describe a god that comes in forms of animals alongside of forms of Jesus Christ or Krishna, right? And Krishna is, again, Krishnaanity. You have this idea of Krishna, the slayer of serpents, who comes down, and he's blue. There's a lot of these characters that are blue, and you wonder, well, what's the deal? We've talked maybe about copper blood, blue blood crabs. Nice. They would be blue-blooded. It's the Star Trek thing. But blue blood crabs, lots of money there. $15,000 a liter from blue blood crabs. And this is all from where I was living in Virginia. There's this time of the year where they'll drain the blue blood crab. It looks like something out of Star Trek for sure. And then you got these like blue milk, right? Star Wars, the blue milk. $60,000 a gallon. It's crazy. And they're making synthetic versions of this, and it's super healthy for you. And the bottom line is it's copper-based blood. So if you look at the idea of non-iron blood nanotechnology, they're starting to work on new kinds of blood substitutes with nanotechnologies that use titanium that will have a range of oxygen preservation of maybe 1,000,000 times that of iron. So you can imagine you hold your breath. Let's say you're dying because your heart stops, and you're like, oh gosh, my heart stopped. So you go to bed. You grab a beer, you go to bed. The next morning, though, you go to work, and you're like, oh man, my heart stopped. I got to deal with this. So you're like, oh, I got to call the doctor. And you get home, and your wife's like, did you call the doctor? Like, it's 5. I'll call him tomorrow. So the next day, you call the doctor, and the doctor's like, yeah, you really got to deal with this. You should come through the clinic. Do you have any time next week? No, the week after's fine. Just get in here within the month. And you haven't breathed a breath since your heart stopped, right? So, but you're oxygenated, and your oxygen will last in your system up until maybe 3 to 4 weeks, or maybe a year, or who knows how often. If you have certain kinds of densities, you'll be able to hold oxygen for crazy amounts of time. And then there's even ideas of making chemically activated systems that can digest oxygen directly in your blood and start to make gases that can be digested. Now, that's dangerous in certain ways. There's a reason why you're chemically holding it in a liquid form. And Herophilus was trying to warn us about there's not really oxygen running through the veins. But then this also makes you wonder about ancient life more, because we don't really know about all life. We only know about what life is left, and what evidence is left of life that's lost. So the idea that there being other kinds of life that were interacting with them at that time, that were genetically modified by these super beings. And again, I think we've talked about the Varaha. Let me jump to that too. One second. Veda. The Vimana, flying machine of Hinduism. Vimana's flying machine of Hinduism that many considered as an ancient UFOs. Let's go Vimanas really quickly. Pictures. You've seen these ideas that Vimanas are these bells. We talk about how my story about Snowbell the pig wasn't Snowflake, it was Snowbell. Jared Booster has a good channel. I think also you guys probably should look at Jared Booster. I hope Jared Booster's satisfied with knowing that. I'll do it another time. Jared Booster, though, I don't know how to make my thing work properly, and things just freeze on me. There we go. Vimanas. Gosh, the windows are always messed up. Vimanas. Let me jump back to that page a second ago. Many temples in southern India are adorned with small Vimanas in construction, like dome-shaped hatch crowning ancient structures, hiding a 6,000-year-old secret. But how big were these things? And you start to look at some of the pictures and these ideas of them being freaking cities in the sky. And then not just that, but they're electric, they're spinning. This is also like realistic angels video that came out a while ago. And I showed some pictures of this. Come on, internet, don't fail me now. Where is that thing? Rendering, CGI rendering. There you go. The biblically accurate angels video. And so you look at the biblically accurate angels, and the idea that they're infinitely covered in eyes, they can fly, but they spin around each other, in these weird helioscopic systems, gyroscoping systems, gyroscoping. So this is crazy enough, but then you compare that to some of these stories of the Vimanas and this idea, okay, well, you have these terminals of data that are data farmed, and then they print that data to life, right? And this is it's reminiscent of these video games, like where you're building a garden or a farm or something like that, and the data goes out there, and the more it reproduces and it functions, the more that data is stored and backed up outside of this terminal in actual biological data storage. So it's kind of an interesting alternative to the theory that is normal. Most people will tell you the idea that technology is being built by humans, and eventually we'll build AI, and but more importantly, right now, technology is being built by humans, and memories, we're gonna start storing memories in machines, right? Well, let me tell you the Vedic alternative, which is that the ancient machines started storing their data in biologic processes because it was more convenient. And the ancient machines are still more aware and more cognizant and more cogent, and still apply all of the technological controls of omnipotence, omnipresence, immortality that everything else is suggesting. So I hope that that's enough, because I'm afraid really to tell you guys too much more today. I feel like I've already gone to the point where who knows if they're going to let me talk about some of this stuff. So let's just save this for now, and we'll just kind of like show a picture of the Tower of Babel real quickly there, just to remind you that the world is like that. Okay, guys, let me check through really quickly the chats again. I got a super chat, $10 from Sticky Marks, sent 10 pounds, 10 pounds, mate. That's just aces. That's aces. Sticky Marks, you're my babe. I love you. If you have questions, I think the thing is, I love that you guys are giving me super chats, and I also love that I'm getting questions. If they were somehow combined, if I got a super chat that asked a question, then I could talk about that question more, and that would start this whole hipster hat tipping thing like Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins, where I do my dance. So keep sending me super chats, thank you. But also, anytime you want to send a super chat, go ahead and freely ask me a question. And you guys know you can go to Xirtus.com. Let me jump back there. Xirtus.com. You can sign up for the reoccurring donations and do the program for Patreon and whatever. But you'll get extra content. There is extra content there. And also, as a supporter, I answer your questions first, and that makes sure that people get the answers you're looking for. So I hope that helps. I hope you guys enjoyed today. Tomorrow we'll have tomorrow I've got an interview that I'm going to put up with. I have 2 interviews I have to release. I think tomorrow I'm going to put up the interview with the Airy brothers, and so Jim Airy and James Airy, Jimbo. He did a great short film about Tartaria, and it kind of, we're all trying to get this into the public stream of consciousness, right? And so he's dealing with actors who've never heard of this stuff, and he's put together this short film that's got everything in it. It's got non-heliocentric Earth theory as kind of this primordial soup, and he's going to continue making it. So it's exciting. I can't wait for you guys to see that. Then Sunday, I will have my interview with Golden Gate Starfort at Dealey Plaza, the JFK assassination spot. And there's a lot more we're talking about. We talk about DuckTales and everything else, and he's an interesting guy. If you haven't seen Golden Gate Starfort Command, make sure you check him out. And go to the Airy Bros radio channel and look for Double Ripple. Double Ripple is the name of his Tartarian short film, so it's very cool. And yeah, again with the shirts, I want to make sure you guys saw that link. I'll go back to the Andreas.me/store. Right there, /store will take you to my store. And then also there's a second store, because there's 2 stores. There's the tier system. We've got the Teespring's more expensive, but the styles are just cooler. I can do wraparounds and pants with all kinds of logos, and I mean, these are sweet. I don't care. I love these clothes. But if you just need like a Tartaria shirt, man, hey, we got you. We got $14 shirts right here, and they're legit. And some of them are simpler. There's a Tartaria shirt, an Xirtus shirt, and a comic Xirtus shirt, which I think arguably this is my favorite because it's mildly hipster in this subgenius way. Even on just a white t-shirt, it looks really good. On a sweatshirt, it looks really good. And it mentions, I can't stop thinking about other worlds. Please kiss me and forget all about Tartaria and Starforts. So I think that's fun. All right, guys. I love you. I'll see you guys later. We'll do some more of this soon. Peace and love.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian.
Really? You think you're getting away with that? I didn't realize. I'm gonna try that one more time because I really do want you guys to see the site. I'm trying so hard. I swear. Okay, Andreas.me store. Andreas.me store. Okay, and then here's the TeePublic store. And there's your shirts. You have the Tartaria shirt, the Xirtus shirt. This time will work shirt. Lots of shirts there. And then Xirtus Teespring. Where's my Teespring? I'll go back. Okay, you go down here and you click on shirt. It'll take you right back to the creator spring right there. Boom, featured projects. Look at that girl. Look at those leggings. Look at those jogging pants. These are great. And there's a lot of different styles here. Tartaria, Starfort, everything you'd ever want. Okay, we're good. You saw it. Creative Teespring, Andreas store, my website. I think we're good. I love you guys. And goodbye. Take 2.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarian.
Recent Tartarian. Recent Tartarian. Recent talk, carry on. Recent talk, carry on.
Hey, everybody, tune in to Recent Tartarians.
Recent talk, carry on.